Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. 15 years. That's how long I had poured myself into that company. I knew the layout of the building better than I knew my own apartment. I could tell you exactly where every emergency exit was, how the printers always jammed on Thursdays, and which vending machine to avoid if you didn't want stale pretzels. I was a department manager, respected, dependable, reliable Mary, the woman who always stayed late, who always smoothed the chaos, who never asked for recognition. So when I got the message, Mary, CEO Chloe would like to see you in conference room 3, ASAP. I didn't panic. I assumed it was another fire to put out. But when I walked into the glass-walled room, the atmosphere was different. Too quiet. Chloe sat at the head of the long table in a crimson blazer that screamed power. Next to her stood Arthur. Arthur, with his perfect jawline and smug expression, wearing a tailored suit and not a hint of humility. My stomach turned. Chloe didn't even ask me to sit. "This," she said, gesturing with a manicured hand toward Arthur, "is Arthur. He'll be assuming the role of strategy lead starting Monday." I blinked. Strategy? Lead? That position had been vacant for months. I had been quietly doing that job on top of mine. "He'll need someone to bring him up to speed," she continued. "You'll train him." I felt my pulse in my ears. This wasn't a conversation. It was a directive. "I've worked with Arthur before," I said carefully. "He has no background in strategy. He doesn't even know our CRM system. He's not qualified." Chloe's smile didn't waver. "He's got potential. He's a fast learner, and this comes from the board." Lies. I knew it. Everyone did. Arthur wasn't just some up-and-comer. He was Chloe's boyfriend, her pet project, her golden boy. I'd seen them together at last year's Christmas party, the way she touched his arm, the way he whispered in her ear. "I'm not comfortable training someone who isn't qualified," I said, my voice calm but steady. "It wouldn't be responsible of me." Chloe's eyes narrowed. "That wasn't a request, Mary. Train him or hand over your badge. Those are your choices." There was a time when I would have swallowed my pride, nodded, played along, but something in me cracked. "No," I said. The room froze. "No?" Chloe echoed, like she'd never heard the word before. "I won't be a pawn in some office romance. I've trained people for over a decade, and I know the difference between talent and nepotism." She stood, the color draining from her face. "Then you're fired." I nodded once. "Then I'm fired." It was the first time in 15 years I walked out of a conference room with my back straight and my conscience clean. My badge was deactivated by the time I reached the lobby. But I had no idea what would happen next, because the following week, at the National Industry Conference, packed with executives, press, and former colleagues, I stepped on stage as the newly appointed Chief Innovation Officer of a rival firm. And when Chloe and Arthur saw me at the keynote, the look on their faces was worth every ounce of the hell I had been through. I told myself it was heat of the moment, that Chloe would cool off, realize what a mistake she'd made. We'd had disagreements before, and things were smoothed over by Monday. She was impulsive, yes, decisive to a fault, but not reckless. So I showed up the next morning at 8:07, latte in hand, Idaho badge ready. I scanned it at the front entrance. Red light. I tried again. Nothing. "Must be a glitch," I mumbled, more to myself than anyone else. The security guard, Gary, the one who always nodded when I passed, stepped out of his booth. But this time, he didn't smile. "Mary, you've been flagged. I'm supposed to escort you to HR." I froze. "Flagged? What does that mean?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I don't know exactly. Just, please follow me." I followed him through the lobby, heart pounding louder with every step. People were arriving for work, filing in with their lanyards and coffee cups, chatting about weekend plans. No one noticed me. Or maybe they pretended not to. The HR office had that sterile lemon cleaner smell. A woman I barely knew, Rebecca, I think, greeted me with the kind of smile reserved for awkward situations and funerals. "We've prepared your transition documents," she said, sliding a file across the table. "Termination by mutual agreement." My mouth went dry. "Mutual?" She blinked. It reflects our understanding that you no longer wish to fulfill the training assignment requested by leadership. I didn't answer. I flipped through the document, each page heavier than the last. Legal phrases wrapped around cold conclusions. Then I reached the last clause, and something inside me cracked. I was to transfer all responsibilities, project materials, intellectual contributions, and documentation to Arthur Harrington, effective immediately. They weren't just letting me go. They were giving him everything I had built: 5-year forecasts, market expansion plans, strategic vendor relationships. He would inherit it all, the system I had designed from the ground up, the legacy I had poured myself into. And my name? Already gone. I opened my laptop on instinct, but the company portal wouldn't load. My credentials had been wiped overnight. No trace of my ID remained. No email, no file ownership, not even a meeting invitation. Like I had never existed. I placed the folder down, gently. Rebecca looked uncomfortable, as if expecting an outburst, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't give them the satisfaction. "I won't be signing this," I said quietly. "Mary," she started, almost apologetically, "this is the cleanest option." "No," I replied, standing. "It's the quietest. That's not the same." Then I walked out, each step steadier than the last. They could erase my name from their systems, but not from the industry, not from the minds of people who knew who really did the work. They didn't fire me. They tried to delete me, and I wasn't going to let them. They gave me a cardboard box. No escort, no final meeting, no announcement. Just a plain box and a vague reminder to clear personal items by the end of the day. And still, I showed up. Not for them, but for myself. Because I wasn't going to vanish like a mistake on a spreadsheet. The floor felt different when I stepped out of the elevator, quieter, colder, as if the air itself had shifted in my absence. I walked to my desk, or what used to be my desk, and began packing. No hesitation, no wasted motion. My mug from the London offsite, the one Chloe used to borrow for her double espressos. The framed photo of my old team, most of whom had already been laid off or transferred. A potted plant that had somehow survived 3 office relocations. Colleagues passed me. Slowly, avoiding eye contact like it was contagious. These were people I'd mentored, defended, fought for in budget reviews and promotion cycles. And now? They clung to their silence like a shield. Fear does that. Makes people small, makes them forget. I didn't blame them, but it still hurt. As I unplugged my monitor, I found it. Tucked beneath my keyboard, a small folded note on plain white paper. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. "You were the reason I didn't quit. Thank you. M." Just one line. No name, just the initial. But I knew. Mia, probably. She'd been fresh out of grad school, drowning in quarterly reports until I took her under my wing. My throat tightened. I placed the note in my coat pocket like it was something sacred. In that moment, it meant more than any title ever had. I took one last look around. No dramatic goodbyes, no angry speech, no gathering at the elevator. Just a quiet woman with a cardboard box, walking away from a building that had never truly seen her. But this time, I wasn't walking away in shame. I wasn't going to disappear into silence like they wanted. This time, I was leaving with my head high and a single thought burning through my chest. They erased me from their system. But I was going to make sure they remembered me anyway. I hadn't planned on leaving the company. Not really. But some part of me must have known. Known that the ceiling was getting lower, that my voice was being reduced to footnotes, that eventually, silence would not be enough. A few months ago, on a rainy Sunday afternoon, I received a message from Daniel. We hadn't spoken in years. We'd met back when I was a junior analyst, both of us young and restless and brimming with ideas. He was the kind of person who asked impossible questions, who questioned everything, including why we spent more time in meetings than actually building anything. He had left the corporate world long ago. I hadn't. His message was simple. I'm building something. It's not funded. It's not safe, but it's real. Want in? I didn't answer right away, but I thought about it for days. Then one weekend, I showed up at a co-working space downtown. Nondescript building, second floor, a door with no name on it. Daniel looked exactly the same. A little grayer, maybe, but still wearing that same faded hoodie and chaotic energy. He introduced me to Mariko. It wasn't just a product. It was a vision, an AI-powered system that could analyze operations, predict failures, and make adaptive recommendations in real time. But unlike the tools I had built for corporate clients, Mariko didn't have 10 layers of approval or meaningless acronyms. It was lean, it was smart, and it worked. Daniel had been building the architecture alone for 6 months before I joined him. "I need someone who knows real systems," he said. "Not just the code, the people, the politics, the traps." So I joined. But under one condition, I used my middle name. "Call me Elise," I told him. He laughed, but agreed. And for the first time in years, I felt free. On weekends, I shed the careful voice I used in meetings. I didn't need to defend my ideas or tiptoe around fragile egos. I just built. I mapped data structures, tested scenarios, created use case simulations. Daniel trusted my instincts. No committees, no memos, just work that mattered. And slowly, Mariko evolved. She began to identify inefficiencies before they even appeared. Not just technical errors, but behavioral patterns, decision-making blind spots, momentum drains. We joked that she had better emotional intelligence than half the C-suite at my day job. I didn't tell anyone, not even Mia. It was our secret, something untouched by office politics or strategic realignments. Now, standing outside my former office with a box in my hands and a corporate badge that no longer opened doors, I realized something. I wasn't walking into the unknown. I was walking into something I had already started. And this time, I wouldn't be Elise in the shadows. I would be Mary. And the world was about to know what Mariko could do. The email came at 2:14 a.m., glowing quietly in the dark like a whisper from the universe. Subject line: Results from pilot. Wow. I wasn't expecting anything. I'd only gotten up because I couldn't sleep. Not after the way the day had ended, with a long debugging session and the hollow echo of a too-quiet apartment. I rubbed my eyes, padded barefoot to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and checked my inbox like a habit I hadn't kicked. It was from Lorne. Lorne Kapoor, COO of Aero Freight. We'd worked together 2 years ago when I was still at that company. Back then, I had presented a proposal to overhaul his firm's route optimization model. He'd liked it. His board hadn't. They said it was too experimental. Chloe had called it overly ambitious. It never made it past the pilot phase. I clicked the email, bracing for polite feedback or another deferral. Instead, I found this. Mary, or should I say, Elise. We implemented Mariko's recommended load, balancing and delivery window compression. Just the first tier of changes. We saved $203,119 this quarter. That's not projected. That's audited. Honestly, I don't know what kind of wizardry you're running behind that interface, but it works. And it feels different. There's no fluff, no buzzwords, no dashboards that just look pretty. Mariko talks like someone who's actually lived the operations floor. Keep going, please. I read it 3 times. My hands trembled, not from fear, but something stranger, something stronger. Relief, pride, maybe even peace. I wasn't waiting for validation. That wasn't the point of Mariko. But this? This was the kind of victory I hadn't known I needed. No awards, no applause. Just a real business, solving a real problem, quietly letting the results speak for themselves. I didn't tell Daniel right away. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, watching the ceiling like it might answer a question I didn't know how to ask. For 15 years, I had fought to be heard. In boardrooms, in email threads, in project reviews where my slides were presented by someone else while I was told to take notes. Now, I was still invisible. But this time, it was by design. Because what we were building wasn't about me, or Daniel, or anyone's ego. It wasn't tangled in office politics or corporate infighting. It didn't need Chloe's approval or Arthur's sales pitch. It just needed to work. And it did. The next morning, I told Daniel, He laughed so loud the woman at the next co-working table jumped. 200 grand? Off one tier of implementation? I nodded, sipping coffee. They haven't even touched the logistics stress simulator yet. He whistled, eyes wide. Remind me to never underestimate you again. I smiled, but inside I felt something settle. A weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying started to lift. More emails followed over the next few weeks. A mid-sized manufacturing firm in Illinois, a tech distribution warehouse in Germany, a regional grocery chain that had quietly licensed Marico for its cold storage tracking. They all came in through Daniel's network or mutual contacts. No PR, no ad campaigns, just results and whispers that someone, or something, out there was fixing the things legacy systems couldn't even diagnose. Clients loved how clean it was, how Marico didn't just flag issues, but explained why they were happening, and what the downstream impact would be. She was intuitive, honest, uncomplicated. Everything I had never been allowed to be inside a corporate tower. And even though my name wasn't on any press releases, and Elise remained just a contact on our internal Slack, I felt more seen than I ever had when they called me director, because I was building something that couldn't be stolen. This wasn't a promotion. This was a reclamation. Every late night spent documenting systems they'd later take credit for. It was fuel. Every ignored warning, every overlooked pitch, every time someone had smiled and said, "We'll circle back." It had sharpened me. They had taken my title. They had taken my projects. They had taken my badge. But they couldn't take this. They couldn't take Marico, because Marico was mine. It started the way these things always do, not with a crash, but with a murmur, a whisper, a delay, a number that doesn't quite add up, the kind of thing you'd overlook if you didn't know better. But I did. Lena's message came first, 10:43 p.m. on a Tuesday, p.m. on. He shut down the overnight optimization reports, said they were too technical. "Mary, we missed 4 shipments this week." 4. He told us to eyeball it instead. I'm losing my mind. Lena had been with the company for 8 years. She was calm, precise. If she was panicking, it wasn't a fluke. Still, I didn't reply. By the end of the week, my inbox had a dozen more messages, all variations of the same thing. Arthur doesn't get it. Chloe won't listen. They replaced the regional tracking model with a PowerPoint presentation. And underneath every complaint, the same silent question lingered. Where are you? They had wanted me silent, invisible. And now that the scaffolding was shaking, they were hoping I'd step back in and brace it. But I didn't feel vindicated, just hollow, because I remembered the faces behind those messages. I remembered the meetings, the weekend work sessions, the late-night calls with clients, the emergency pivots that only happened because we'd stayed calm and coordinated. They weren't just numbers. They were people who had once been my team. And now? They were hanging on by threads. Arthur had dismissed 2 senior analysts without even reviewing their portfolios. He told the systems team that intuition mattered more than metrics. He pulled the plug on the forecasting model because he didn't like how negative it made things look. One of the models I had built to track seasonal fluctuations in regional distribution was erased entirely. No backup, just gone. "They're simplifying," someone messaged me. But simplification in this context meant gutting. Meanwhile, client retention plummeted. A multinational supplier paused its quarterly renewal. Then came the official termination letters. First from longtime logistics partners, then from emerging markets we'd fought hard to secure. It was like watching a dam crack. Not all at once, just piece by piece. And each time, the water rose higher. By the 3rd week, people started leaving. Quietly, discreetly. No dramatic exits. Just cubicles that sat dark a little too long. Chairs pushed in. Goodbye notes sent only to private emails. HR called it a transition phase. I called it what it was, exodus. But I stayed quiet, even when the messages turned personal. "You were right." "I wish I'd backed you up in that meeting. They said you were bitter, but you were just tired of fixing things for people who never gave you credit." It should have made me feel better, but it didn't. Because truth, when it comes too late, is a wound, not a reward. I didn't want their apologies. I didn't want their guilt. What I wanted was never theirs to give. What I wanted, I was already building. Mariko was growing. New clients were onboarding every week. Daniel and I were planning a quiet beta for enterprise accounts. I was working late again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because it felt like I was shaping something that mattered, something that couldn't be unmade with a memo or a revoked badge. And so I watched, as the company that had discarded me unraveled. I watched as Arthur blamed unexpected market disruptions, as Chloe stood in front of shareholders and smiled through teeth that clenched just a little too hard. I watched without a hint of glee, because it wasn't satisfying, it was just inevitable. They hadn't fired me. They had fired the glue, and now they were discovering what happens when the structure you ignored is the only thing that ever held the walls together. Daniel's eyes were wide as he read the email. "Guess who wants to pilot Mariko?" he said, spinning his laptop toward me like he was revealing a magic trick. The sender, procurement@strahl.global, my former company. My breath caught in my throat. "Is this real?" I asked, squinting at the screen. Daniel nodded. They came through the public demo portal, asked about an enterprise tier, said they're looking to stabilize logistics after internal restructuring. Apparently, someone named Arthur Harrington recommended us after seeing the platform at the conference. I blinked. Arthur recommended us? Of course he had. Because Mariko had been the quiet star of the conference, a sleek demo booth in the corner with no flashy slogans, no salespeople in suits, just performance data and real case studies. She didn't need a pitch. She proved herself. And now the very person who'd once dismissed my work, who replaced my strategies with ego and chaos, was unknowingly asking for my help. "I don't get it," Daniel said, narrowing his eyes. "They pushed you out. Why would they come back?" "Because they think I'm gone," I said softly. And that was the truth. They thought I had vanished, that I had disappeared into some irrelevant, quiet resignation. Their system showed no trace of me. My email was deleted, my files reassigned, my title given to someone who didn't even understand how the workflows were connected. But here I was, not under my name, not under their radar. I was the ghost in their system now, invisible, but shaping every line of code they were desperate to use. Daniel leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "So, do we take the meeting?" I didn't answer immediately. Part of me wanted to say no, let them drown in the mess they made. But another part, the strategist, the builder, the woman who had been silenced, saw something else. Leverage. "Yes," I said. "We'll take the meeting." "But not as Mary." Daniel smirked. "Still going by Elise?" "Not even that," I said. "This time, I'm just the strategist. No name, no identity. I'll be on the call. I'll lead it. But to them, I'm just a voice, an expert, a ghost." He raised his eyebrows. "Cold." "No," I said. "Measured." They wouldn't know it was me, not yet. They'd walk into the room with their assumptions intact, thinking they were dealing with some upstart firm Daniel co-founded. That their former employee had vanished like an error in the system, and I would let them believe it. Because when you erase someone's name from the wall, you forget they can still walk through it. The meeting was set for next week, and I would be there, listening to Arthur pitch his panic, watching Chloe try to spin failure into strategy, hearing them talk about Mariko like it was some mystery they just discovered, and I would say nothing, not yet, because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's relevance. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. Daniel was logged in 10 minutes early, wearing a clean shirt over yesterday's jeans, fidgeting with his mic. I didn't bother turning on my camera. On the screen, my name was a placeholder. Strategist #4. No title, no initials, just a generic tag in a sea of polished faces. From their side, Chloe, looking paler than I remembered, her trademark crimson blazer replaced with something beige and tired. And Arthur, grinning, confident, completely unaware of who was listening in the dark. He still had that smugness, that theater in his voice. He called Mariko a breakthrough in adaptive logistics, tossed around buzzwords like breadcrumbs, and framed their interest as a strategic collaboration opportunity. I stayed quiet until he shared his screen, And then I saw it. A document labeled Operational Forecasting Enhancement Proposal, Internal Draft. It was the framework I had built, not similar, not inspired, not adjusted, copied, line for line. He had lifted the model I'd created in my final year, the one they shelved when I left, claiming it was too complex. They hadn't even changed the formatting. It still had the color-coded tags I'd invented for process bottlenecks. It still used the same performance index I'd developed from 3 years of data. Even the phrasing was mine. I froze. Not in shock, in recognition, because now I knew, without a shadow of doubt, that they hadn't just erased me. They had stolen me. They were standing in my footprints and pretending they had invented the path. Daniel glanced at me through our internal back channel. "This is yours, isn't it?" I typed one word. "Yes." I unmuted for the first time. "Thank you for the overview," I said, keeping my voice smooth and low. "Before we proceed, we'll need to add a clause to the engagement contract." Arthur frowned. "Clause?" I continued, emotionless. "Mariko has a proprietary module that checks incoming system inputs for duplications and structural anomalies. We call it Echo." That wasn't true. Not yet. But it would be. Daniel blinked, then slowly smiled. "Echo ensures that any pre-existing internal materials, if integrated into Mariko, are checked against our IP database," I added. "It helps avoid confusion around authorship and contribution. A polite way to say, we'll know if you plagiarized." Arthur shifted in his seat. Chloe narrowed her eyes. I leaned in, even though no one could see me. "You'll need to sign off on that clause if you want access to the enterprise features." Daniel added, "It's standard now, for all clients." Silence. Then Chloe forced a smile. "Understood. Please send the revised agreement." The call ended shortly after. When the screen went dark, Daniel looked at me and let out a long breath. "You just trapped him." "No," I said quietly, closing my laptop. "He trapped himself." The proof was in writing now. They'd used my stolen work to try and fix the very system they broke by pushing me out. They thought they were dealing with strangers. But I was still here, still watching. And soon, the truth wouldn't just whisper. It would echo. The meeting was set in one of those glass conference rooms at a boutique hotel downtown. All clean lines, faux greenery, and too much lemon-scented polish. Daniel and I arrived early, but I didn't go in. Not yet. I waited in the corridor, watching the people file in through the slatted glass. Chloe in a tailored gray dress, her posture stiff as stone. Arthur, fiddling with his cufflinks, overly eager. 2 board members took seats near the end, older, sharper, quiet. Daniel was already seated, smiling politely as he opened his laptop and laid out the onboarding proposal. He looked at me through the glass and gave a subtle nod. 5 minutes past the hour, I opened the door. Silence. Chloe glanced up instinctively, then froze. Arthur looked confused, then pale. I didn't say a word. Just walked in, heels soft on the carpet, and took the empty seat at the far end of the table. I didn't bring a laptop, just a small leather folder and a pen. Arthur blinked once, then again, like a man seeing a ghost. I looked straight ahead, neutral, dignified, as if I belonged there, because I did. Daniel cleared his throat. "This is our lead strategist. She'll be overseeing the integration directly. No name, no history, no explanation." A long pause stretched the air. Arthur swallowed. I think we've met before, haven't we?" I didn't answer. Chloe stiffened. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped her chair. Then one of the board members, a quiet man with silver hair and an expression like a ledger, finally spoke. "Excuse me," he said, turning toward Chloe, "but wasn't she with your company? In a leadership role?" Chloe didn't speak, so he turned to me. "Is that correct?" I smiled faintly. "I was with the company for 15 years. Silence descended like a fog. "And may I ask, why did you leave?" The question was gentle, curious, but it shattered the room. Arthur flinched. Chloe's voice faltered. "There were personnel conflicts." The silver-haired man raised a brow. "And yet here she is, leading the system you're about to implement?" The temperature dropped. I still said nothing. I didn't need to. I wasn't there to shout. I wasn't there to defend. I was there to sign. Daniel passed around the updated agreement, the one that transferred key operational oversight to Mariko under a strategic partnership clause. On paper, it looked collaborative. In practice, it gave us control of everything they had lost: forecasting, logistics, decision systems. Arthur tried to ask a question, something about clauses and quarterly reviews, but his voice cracked halfway through. Chloe stayed silent, and I just turned the final page, lifted the pen, and signed my name. Mary E. Harland. Not Elise. Not strategist, #4. Mary. I handed it back, stood, and offered a polite nod. Thank you for the partnership. Then I left. No drama, no grand speech, no vindictive looks, just a woman walking out of a room she no longer feared, with everything they tried to steal from her now resting in her hands. I walked out without a word. No handshakes, no smiles, no lingering eye contact or victory laps. Just silence. The kind that follows something irreversible. Outside, the hotel lobby buzzed with business as usual. Suits checking phones, baristas calling names, taxis arriving in tight intervals. But I felt it all from a distance, as if I were walking through a soundless film. Because inside, in that glass-walled room, something had shifted. Not for me. For them. They didn't know it yet. Not entirely. But the moment I signed that contract, the company they thought they controlled slipped quietly into my orbit. Not with noise, not with scandal, with systems, with process flows and data inputs and predictive algorithms that now all ran through Mariko. Through me. They had made themselves dependent, blindly, hungrily, on the very architecture they once dismissed. On the woman they deleted, the voice they silenced, and I hadn't needed to destroy them. All I had to do was build something better, something they couldn't recreate without me. There was no need to claw my way back up their broken ladder. I had built a tower next to it, and they were already knocking on my door. In the weeks that followed, Mariko's influence spread. First to logistics, then operations, then strategic planning. What started as consulting quickly became core infrastructure. Teams defaulted to our models. Directors sent proposals to our system before running them past Chloe. The dependency was seamless. They didn't even fight it, because it worked. And then, the call came. From an investor I barely remembered meeting, someone who had once looked past me in a crowded boardroom. He called me directly this time. "Mary," he said, "we're considering restructuring executive leadership. There's interest in bringing you in. Not advisory, not interim. We're talking CEO." I didn't answer right away, not because I doubted, but because I didn't need to say yes to feel the weight of what had just been offered. For years, I had fought to be heard, fought to keep projects alive, fought to stay relevant in rooms where my value was always measured in silence. But now, I wasn't fighting. I was standing, not on their ladder, not in their tower, but on the summit I had carved out for myself, brick by quiet brick. I told him I'd think about it, because I had the luxury now of choosing, and that was the true power, not just returning, but returning with the option to walk away, to lead if I chose, or to build something even higher elsewhere. They erased me, and I came back not as a ghost, but as the architect of their future, not the victim, the system, the one they couldn't run without.